What happens when a former royal sits down for what should be a simple morning show interview, only to have the host challenge her on live television in ways she never expected? The tension in the Good Morning America studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife. And what started as promotional appearance quickly spiraled into a confrontation that had producers scrambling and viewers glued to their screens. Before we dive into this incredible clash, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about celebrity interview meltdowns. The morning started like any other at Good Morning America. Michael Strahan had his coffee, reviewed his notes, and prepared for what he assumed would be another standard celebrity interview. Meghan Markle was scheduled to discuss her latest humanitarian projects and perhaps touch on her life in California. The producers had briefed everyone to keep things light and positive, the kind of feel-good segment that plays well with morning television audiences, but Michael Strahan had other plans. As the cameras rolled and the familiar Good Morning America theme music faded, Strahan flashed his signature smile and began what seemed like a perfectly normal introduction. We're here with Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, philanthropist, and former actress, Meghan. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Meghan smiled warmly, clearly comfortable in the plush interview chair. She was dressed impeccably in a cream-colored blazer, her hair styled in loose waves, every inch the polished public figure. Thank you so much for having me, Michael. It's wonderful to be here. Now, I have to ask, Strahan continued, his tone still friendly, but with an edge that made Meghan shift slightly in her seat. You've been quite vocal about your experiences with the media, particularly the British press. You've talked about feeling unwelcome, about racist coverage, about the toll it took on your mental health. But here's what I'm curious about, and I think our viewers are too. Do you ever take responsibility for any of the negative coverage you received? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan's smile faltered for just a moment, her media training kicking in as she processed the unexpected directness. This wasn't the softball interview she'd been promised. I'm sorry. Could you clarify what you mean by that? She asked, her voice measured, but with a slight tremor that suggested she was caught off guard. Strahan leaned forward slightly, his expression serious now. Well, you left the royal family. You gave that explosive interview with Oprah. You've written books, done podcasts, signed massive deals with Netflix and Spotify. You've essentially built a brand around being the royal who was mistreated. Some people might say that you've profited quite handsomely from your victim narrative. The studio fell silent, except for the quiet hum of cameras. Even the crew seemed to hold their breath. Meghan's face went through a range of micro-expressions. Surprise, hurt, then something harder, more defensive. I think that's an incredibly unfair characterization of my experience, she replied, her voice gaining strength. Speaking truth about racism, about mental health struggles, about institutional failures, that's not creating a victim narrative. That's using my platform to highlight important issues that affect millions of people. But is it really about helping others? Strahan pressed. Or is it about rehabilitation, your own image? Because let's be honest, Meghan, your approval ratings have fluctuated quite a bit. There are people who see your advocacy work as genuine, and there are others who see it as damage control. Meghan's jaw tightened visibly. Michael, I have to say I'm surprised by the tone of these questions. I came here to discuss my work with veterans, my initiatives supporting women's economic empowerment, my efforts to promote literacy among children. Instead, you seem more interested in perpetuating the same tired narratives that have followed me for years. I'm asking the questions that I think our viewers want answered, Strahan shot back. You can't control the narrative in every interview, Meghan. Sometimes you have to address the elephant in the room. And what elephant would that be? Meghan's. The voice was rising now, the careful composure starting to crack. The fact that everywhere you go, drama seems to follow. The royal family, your relationship with your father, staff turnover, media conflicts. At some point, don't you have to look in the mirror and ask yourself if maybe, just maybe, you're part of the problem? The accusation hit like a slap. Meghan sat back in her chair, her eyes flashing with anger. That is completely out of line. You're essentially victim blaming, suggesting that I'm somehow responsible for the racism and harassment I've endured. Would you ask a black man who faced discrimination at work if maybe he was part of the problem? Don't make this about race. When it's about accountability, Strahan fired back, his own voice rising. I'm a black man too, Meghan. I've faced my share of challenges, but I don't use my race as a shield every time someone asks me a tough question. A shield? Meghan's voice was incredulous now. Michael, are you seriously suggesting that calling out racist coverage is using race as a shield? Do you have any idea what it was like to have the British tabloids compare me to chimpanzees? To have my child's skin color speculated about before he was even born? And I'm not minimizing that experience, Strahan said, but his tone suggested otherwise. What I'm questioning is whether every piece of criticism you receive is automatically racist, or whether some of it might be legitimate concerns about your behavior, your choices, your approach to public life. The interview was completely off the rails now. Both participants leaning forward, their voices carrying across the studio in a way that had producers frantically gesturing from behind the cameras. This wasn't morning television anymore. This was a full-blown confrontation. You want to talk about behavior? Meghan's voice was sharp now, all pretense of media polish gone. Let's talk about the behavior of a host who ambushes his guest with hostile questions that have nothing to do with why she agreed to come on the show. Let's talk about the behavior of a journalist who seems more interested in ratings than in actually informing his audience. I'm trying to have an honest conversation, Strahan insisted. Something that seems to be in short supply when it comes to your public appearances. Everything is so carefully managed, so controlled. Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe people don't trust you because they feel like they never get the real you, the real me. Meghan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Michael, you don't know anything about the real me. You know what you've read in gossip magazines and seen in carefully edited clips. You've made up your mind about who I am based on a narrative that was created by people who had every reason to want to see me fail. Or maybe, Strahan said, his voice growing colder, the narrative exists because there's some truth to it. Maybe the reason you've had so many conflicts, so many burned bridges, is because the common denominator in all of these situations is you. The words hung in the air like poison. Meghan's face went pale, then flushed red with anger. For a moment, she seemed genuinely speechless, her mouth opening and closing as if she couldn't quite believe what she'd just heard. Did you just suggest that I'm the problem in every situation I've ever been in? She finally managed, her voice dangerously quiet. That I'm somehow responsible for the institutional racism of the British monarchy. For my father selling stories to tabloids for harassment, campaigns orchestrated by people I've never even met. I'm suggesting, Strahan said, his tone becoming more aggressive, that maybe it's time for some self-reflection. You've been in the public eye for years now, and controversy follows you everywhere. At what point do you stop blaming everyone else and start taking some responsibility? Responsibility for what, exactly? Meghan shot back. For marrying someone I loved, for standing up for myself when I was being attacked, for choosing to leave a situation that was damaging my mental health and my family's well-being. Responsibility for the way you've handled all of it. Strahan fired back. The way you've weaponized your story, turned personal grievances into public spectacles, profited off of pain while claiming to be above it all. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the studio floor. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by someone who clearly came into this interview with an agenda. This is supposed to be journalism, Michael, not a hit job. Sit down, Meghan, Strahan said firmly, gesturing to her chair. We're not done here. Actually, we are, she replied, but she remained standing, her hands clenched at her sides. Unless you want to have an actual conversation about the work I'm here to discuss, instead of relitigating tabloid talking points. The work, Strahan repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. You mean the work that conveniently aligns with rehabilitating your public image? The carefully chosen causes that make you look sympathetic? How dare you? Meghan's voice cracked. With emotion? How dare you suggest that my work with veterans who've sacrificed everything for their countries is some kind of publicity stunt? How dare you imply that supporting women's economic empowerment is about my image rather than about changing lives? I'm not questioning the causes, Strahan said, though his tone suggested otherwise. I'm questioning your motives. Everything you do seems calculated, focus grouped, designed to make you look good rather than to actually make a difference. You know what's calculated, Meghan shot back. This interview. You brought me here under false pretenses. Told my team we'd be discussing my charitable work. And instead, you've spent the entire time trying to tear me down for your ratings. Maybe because that's what real journalism looks like, Strahan replied coldly. Not the softball interviews you're used to, where everyone treats you with kid gloves because you're supposedly fragile. Fragile. Meghan's voice rose to nearly a shout. You think I'm fragile, Michael? I've survived things that would break most people. I've endured harassment that drove me to the brink, threats against my children, lies printed about me every single day for years. And I'm still here, still fighting, still working to make the world better. That's not fragility, that's strength. Or it's victimhood as performance art, Strahan said with a cruel smile. You've turned suffering into your brand, Meghan. Every interview, every appearance, every project comes back to how badly you've been treated. It's exhausting. The studio had gone completely silent, except for their voices. Camera operators were frozen in place, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut away. Producers were frantically whispering into headsets, trying to figure out how to salvage what had become a complete disaster. You want to know what's exhausting? Meghan said, her voice shaking with rage. It's being a black woman in spaces where you're not wanted, where every move you make is scrutinized, where your very existence is seen as threatening. It's being told to smile and be grateful, while people profit off of tearing you down. There you go again, Strahan said dismissively. Every criticism becomes about race. Every tough question becomes about your identity. You can't have a conversation about your actual choices because you immediately pivot to discrimination. Because my choices don't exist in a vacuum, Michael. Meghan exploded. When I speak up, I'm called difficult. When I stay quiet, I'm called weak. When I defend myself, I'm called aggressive. When I don't, I'm called a doormat. There's no winning for women like me, and you know it. Women like you, Strahan repeated mockingly. You mean wealthy, privileged women who marry into royalty and then spend years complaining about how hard their lives are. I mean black women, Meghan said fiercely. I mean women who dare to have opinions, who refuse to be diminished, who won't apologize for taking up space. And the fact that you're sitting here, as a black man, trying to tear down a black woman, for speaking her truth, that's what's really exhausting. Don't you dare question my credentials as a black man, Strahan said, his voice turning dangerous. I've earned everything I have through hard work and talent, not through marrying into it. I've faced real discrimination, real challenges, without having to run to Oprah every time things got tough. Real discrimination. Meghan's laugh was bitter, as opposed to, what, fake discrimination? Michael, you sound like the very people who spent years trying to silence me. The people who said my experiences weren't valid, my pain wasn't real, my truth wasn't worth telling. Your truth, Strahan said with air quotes, changes depending on the audience. Your truth to Oprah was different from your truth to the Netflix cameras, which was different from your truth in your podcast. Which version should we believe? All of them, Meghan shot back, because trauma is complicated, because healing isn't linear, because sometimes it takes time to find the courage to tell the whole story. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? You've never had to rebuild your entire life from scratch while the whole world watched and judged. Maybe because I never burned down my entire life for attention in the first place, Strahan said cruelly. The words hit like a physical blow. Meghan took a step back, her face going white with shock and hurt. For a moment, the fight seemed to go out of her completely. Attention, she whispered, and then her voice grew stronger. You think I did? All of this for attention. You think I gave up everything I knew, moved to a different country, started over completely, faced death threats and harassment, put my children in danger, all for attention? I think you made a series of choices, Strahan said, his voice cold and clinical now. And when those choices had consequences you didn't like, you decided to blame everyone else rather than own up to them. The consequences, Meghan repeated. Slowly, the consequences of marrying someone I loved, the consequences of being black in an institution built on white supremacy, the consequences of having opinions, of standing up for myself, of refusing to be broken down into nothing. The consequences of your actions, Strahan insisted, your choices to go public, to break protocol, to air family business in front of millions of people. Those were your decisions, Meghan. Own them. Own them. Meghan's voice was now ice cold, a stark contrast to the heated emotion that had been building throughout the interview. You want me to own my decisions? Fine. I own the decision to protect my family from an institution that saw us as expendable. I own the decision to speak truth to power even when it was uncomfortable. I own the decision to choose my mental health and my children's safety over public approval. And I own this decision too, she continued, reaching up to remove her microphone. I own the decision not to sit here and be degraded by someone who clearly has no interest in journalism, only in performance. You can't just walk away, Meghan, Strahan said, standing up as well. This is live television. You don't get to control this narrative the way you control everything else. Watch me, she replied, dropping the microphone onto her chair, where it landed with a sharp thud that echoed through the studio speakers. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Strahan called after her, as she took a step toward the edge of the interview area. The moment things get uncomfortable, someone asks you the real questions, you run. Just like you ran from the royal family, just like you ran from your own father, just like you run from everyone who doesn't tell you exactly what you want to hear. Meghan stopped dead in her tracks. Slowly, deliberately, she turned back to face him. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but carried clearly across the silent studio. You want to talk about running, Michael? Let's talk about running. I ran from people who leaked stories about my private conversations to the press. I ran from people who refused to defend me when newspapers printed lies about me. I ran from people who stood by and watched while I was destroyed, piece by piece, and did nothing. She took a step back toward him, her eyes blazing. But you know what I didn't run from? I didn't run from the fight. I didn't run from standing up for myself. I didn't run from using my voice, even when it cost me everything. Your voice, Strahan scoffed. Your voice that only seems to work when there's a camera rolling or a book deal on the table. My voice, Meghan said firmly, that has raised millions of dollars for charity. My voice that has brought attention to mental health issues that affect millions of people. My voice that has given courage to other women who felt silenced and alone. Your voice that has also torn apart a family, damaged an institution that's lasted for centuries, and turned personal pain into public entertainment. Strahan shot back, the family that refused to protect me. Meghan's laugh was sharp and bitter. The institution that has survived by adapting and changing, except when it came to accepting a black woman as an equal member. Michael, you're defending systems that would never defend you. I'm defending accountability, Strahan insisted. Something you seem allergic to. Accountability. Meghan shook her head in disbelief. I've been accountable every single day since I entered public life. Accountable. For every word, every gesture, every choice. I've been held accountable for things I never did, words I never said, intentions I never had. She moved closer to him now, her voice growing in intensity. But where's the accountability for the people who harassed me? Where's the accountability? For the newspapers that printed lies, where's the accountability for the institution?